Goedemiddag aan allen en iedereen. Bonjour à tout le monde pour ce webinaire sur le public procurement. Welkom voor dit webinar Public Procurement. Willkommen allen für dieses Webinar bezüglich öffentlich Angeboten. As you already hear from my current intervention, it's not easy in Belgium because we have 3 official languages, and which is one of the reasons why I ask you the permission to continue in English. We have a select number of panelists which will provide you some more intel and info on public procurement. Well, as you see, my name shows now the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency, but I'm Didier de Bare. I'm the Deputy General Director. We will go firstly, as a way of introduction, shortly into the how and what is the definition of public procurement. Normally, you will see my shared screen right now. Which is blocking for one or the other reason, but what is public procurement? Well, if we look at the definition of our public procurement, and I'm sure that everybody knows what it's about, but we distinguish 2 main categories. Firstly, the tenders, which are worldwide published by national governments, and in which governmental institutions ask the private market to make an offer in respect of a certain opportunity, business opportunity. It's things that governments need, and the private market can deliver it to those governments. Secondly, the same goes for bilateral and multilateral organizations. You might think of the World Bank, regional development banks like the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Banks, and so on. What are the main characteristics? Well, we all know that in OECD countries, and the same counts for multilateral organizations, they're quite rigorously regulated, which means that a certain procedure has been established. That certain procedure has to be followed from the very beginning till the very end. In other countries, it's not always that clear. There are some regions, especially when they are less developed, where public procurement as such is also under development. Quite definitely, this will be more explained by some of our intervening speakers. But what is the perception by our Belgian companies of public procurement? Well, we did a little survey, and most of the questions that pop up is the requirements in public procurement are quite high compared to the level of importance of the business opportunity, which means even for a small tender, like buying a number of pens by a certain government institution, it already has to follow certain rules. There has to be a quite large amount of paperwork to be filled in. The second problem is that in contradiction to B2B opportunities, you don't always see the other party. In a B2B opportunity, it's quite easy when you want to make some more explanations about the offer you are making. You take a plane, you go and see your business partner, and you explain, you convince them that you're the best to get the job awarded. With governments, that is not always the case, and in Europe it's not the case at all, unless this government invites you for a panelist conversation or allows you to make a physical presentation. That's not always the case though. Thirdly, there are accompanying requirements, financial requirements. You have bid bonds, you have performance bonds. And if you're not a big multinational, one might ask himself, how do I get this? I have to go to my bank. We all know how the banking world, since the financial crisis is, it's getting harder and harder. So it's hard for me also to comply with those financial requirements asked. And it's not an easy task to know where in the world there is this specific opportunity, which might be exactly your cup of tea. If you're in solar panels, for instance, and the example will pop up later during this webinar, you have to know that where a certain government is asking for solar panels. There are various amounts of sources, and it's not always easy to go through all of them. You nearly need someone inside the company who is checking that on a daily basis. This problem will also be addressed, of course. Lastly, especially in Europe, it might take time. Making a public tender means that the governments that issue the tender also have to wait certain time frames before they can close the time frame to submit the offers, before they can make a decision, before they can award it. Then you have maybe even some appeal procedures which can still be applied. The main reason though why not enough or not so many public procurement opportunities are being awarded to Belgian companies, well, it's quite logical. We all know that our economy is very open. It's one of the most open economies worldwide, but we are an economy driven by small and medium enterprises, which means that we do have a feeling, why would we participate in public procurement? Most of the time, it's a large company, a multinational from one of the main G20 economies getting the market. And this brings us to a conclusion that we are the 10th exporter worldwide, but we're only 17th in Europe when it comes to winning public tenders. During this webinar, we are not going to sell the world to you. There will be challenges remaining, and it's very hard to cure them. It is an official procedure, which means that a tender is published. It remains a burden of paperwork. There's a lot of papers to be filled in. There's a lot of requirements that need to be answered. There are a lot of guarantees that need to be submitted with accompanying documents. The only way one can do that and get some experience in it is by doing it, making a good template and taking it from there. As we already said, procedures can take a while before they come to their conclusions, and it's not like a B2B opportunity where you see someone 2 or 3 times, and it's depending on the willingness and the agreement between parties whether or not the contract is awarded. However, in some countries, it goes quicker. We will come back to that also. Why we are here is to address the problems or the things that make it harder in public procurement, where solutions are available and where support can be given. What we see in a whole is that for public tenders, it is more and more some kind of tendency that, and even in those economies where they used to choose multinationals as the ones bringing the solution, but worldwide we see that more and more small and medium-sized enterprises get that chances. It's up to us now to take those chances. The thing is, and not always people are aware of that, there are solutions for the financial requirements and risks. And we do have the advantage in Belgium that with Credendo, for instance, we have the ideal partner to assist you in that. It is, of course, a matter of being aware of it. Likewise, we do have regional agencies, as you might know, due to the reform of the state in 1993, the main competence for the foreign trade was rendered to the regions, so they can play really into the strongholds of their local economies and give them support measures. And that is what we really need to give you as an advice. Do reach out for those people. They are there for you, and they will definitely make that contribution upcoming and show you where they can be of a perfect help to you. Lastly, and then we come back to us, if you think it's quite a burden to look for public market opportunities, we do have some solutions which will make it easier to you. The conclusion for this year, and we are of course in a very strange situation this year, due to COVID-19, we have seen that exports have dropped considerably by 20%. What we do see on the other hand though, is that the B2G, the tenders, the international public market, that it is on the rise. Why? Governments have understood that their economy is in danger, so they need to start investing to give supporting measures to their economy. And that goes as well for giving direct support, but also indirect support by investing in infrastructure, in more opportunities for the local markets. And that is where the public tenders and international projects come in, which made that last year in 2019, public procurement was about 13% in Europe and about 16 to 70% worldwide. We do believe that on a worldwide level, 1 in 5 market opportunities will rise to 20%. So this means that 1 in 5 business opportunities will be based on public procurement. So that's an enormous share of the market, and maybe even too big to just put it aside. As we said, SMEs can more and more benefit without additional hiring, especially if you use the tools which are available to be informed automatically about the opportunities that exist. So the various support opportunities do exist. Now it's getting a matter of starting to use them and to create growth for your company. And it's therefore with a great pleasure that I can introduce my first speaker. I already did refer to him, Mr. Nabil Djijakli of Credendo. I told you we were quite lucky as Belgium to have one of the oldest and most important credit insurers worldwide in Brussels. And Nabil will give us a bigger insight on how Credendo can assist you when you are faced with public markets. Nabil, the floor is entirely yours.
Thank you, DJ. One of the most things I've heard since a few weeks or months is you are on mute. So I had first to unmute myself. DJ, first, let me thank you and thank you, the agency, for organizing this webinar, because as you said, public tender are more and more important. You mentioned the figures of 16 to 17% of a global offer, maybe going up to 20%. So it's true, it's very important. The role of Credendo is to assist companies, and you mentioned especially the small and medium enterprises. We are also there for small and medium enterprises when they are applying for a public tender. This being said, they have first, the company you are interested, first to make their shopping between all the tender and the public procurement and the public market that exists. And therefore, I would say that it's very important, your application trade for you. I mean, Sami will explain it, but you are having some nice information on this application. And then, of course, companies can also rely on AOX Fit Brussels to have help on the local market. If you can go a few slides on the first or the second slide, I would like to say a few words about how we can help companies. First, who is Credendo? You mentioned we are the second oldest trade credit agencies. We are an European credit insurer. We are a monoliner in that sense that you are only, it's the slide number 2, DJ.
Sorry.
Thank you. And which means that we are just providing credit insurance and insurance and financial solution, but we have all the product in our company, in our group, and we are also able to cover the risk worldwide. You can see the mother company of Credendo, because Credendo is now a European group. You can go to the next slide. We are present in 14 countries. I'm going also to announce that we will soon open another branch in another country in Ireland, beginning of December. So we are present in 15 countries in Europe, from London to Moscow. In Belgium, if you go to the next one, how can we help you? Slide number 3, not the slide number 4, please, DJ. There we have 3 companies which are useful for you. The first one is the Credendo Export Credit Agency, which is the public institution. We are benefiting from the state guarantee, so it's a quite solid company, AA rated by Standard & Poor's. We are there able to help companies for medium and long-term projects, meaning more above 2 years until 15 years, which can very often happen when you are dealing with public tender, going sometimes for projects until 10 to 15 years. Then we have 2 other companies in Belgium. The first one is Credendo Short-Term, and there we provide insurance for short-term period, less than 2 years. And the third one, Credendo Excess and Surety, is quite useful in the topic also, DJ, because there you spoke in your introduction about bid bonds and performance bond. And Credendo Excess and Surety is our specialized business entity providing surety, as you can see on the slide, and also other credit insurance product like excess of loss and top-up. So basically, next slide, please. Our role is to support the Belgian international economic relations. You can go to the next slide, please. And we cover the risk relating to export, import, and investment abroad. So this is really our core business, export, trying to mitigate the risk that the companies are facing when they are operating at the international trade. And we are also providing investment insurance if you are investing abroad. This is less of concern in the topics of today, but we are also facilitating the funding of the company and also providing direct funding. And this in particular for the small and medium enterprises. So if you go to the next slide, you working with Credendo means direct access to the whole suite of credit insurance solution. And as I said, covering all the aspect of trade and worldwide, and also with a tailor-made approach. What does it mean? It means I used to say that we have 3 major roles. The first one is a preventive role. The second one is to support a company exporting. And the third one is when things are going wrong, to indemnify and to pay the risk if it's happened. So first role, prevention role. As you can see here, you have a map of the world with various colors, which means that when a company wants to apply for a public procurement tender, the first things to think about is it risky or not? And there you have 2 kinds of risk. The first one is the country. you might apply for a public tender, which means it will be a sovereign risk. It means that it would be paid by the public finance. The first thing is to be sure that the country itself and the public finance are safe. There you see the various colors going from green to red. And of course, red is the worst case scenario. It's a country where the risk is very high, meaning also it's a classification from 1 to 7. In that case, we would definitely advise not to apply for a tender because we are sure the country will be in a difficult position to pay. It's the same, I would say, starting at category 5, 6, it's already a risky business. Second things, we are also providing an assessment of the debtor, meaning of your counterparty, of the client of our client if you are insured. And there also, we are providing an assessment on how in the country, the specific debtor, because you might face, you might tender for a project on the road, for instance, on the infrastructure, which means it won't be directly the Ministry of Finance who would be your counterpart, but the Ministry of Infrastructure, for instance. There also, we have to make a specific monitoring of what we call the debtor risk, the debtor assessment. So first role, prevention, country risk, and your future partner, your future client. Then the question is, when we are starting to work with the company, we have to ask what can go wrong, including in a public tender. So next slide. There, I would say that there are various steps in the discussion. The first one, you have negotiation. And there, it's, as you say, DJ, sometimes a very long process because you have to compile a file. You have to introduce and to fill a lot of forms. You have also to provide of information of yourself. And this part is mainly, we are not really playing an important role, except, as you can see on the second line, potential client does not exist, is too small, or is maybe dangerous. This is our first assessment. Then you invest a lot, you negotiate, and you are in a position to get the contract. Then you come in the second column, the sale. There, what can go wrong and where can we help? You might apply, you might win the tender, but then your buyer, the country, or your ministry can goes to get in trouble in terms of finance, can cancel the contract. There you are facing problems because at that moment you will have made some production costs and you might face some difficulties. There we can, Credendo can provide an insurance, in that case can indemnify part of the cost or the total cost. Then the third period is the delivery, the third step. Your project has been done, the production cost has been spent, the storage, the delivery happen, and then you might face some problem, like unable to deliver for the various reasons you can read, or you can have problem in terms of delivery itself. Your counterpart would not accept it. Then the third risk, which is a major risk, you might face some problem in terms of payment, whatever your client is, including in the tender procedure. And there you might face a few problems, like your clients would refuse to pay, or in some countries or emerging country, you might face some problem like not being able to receive the money because the transfer of the money is difficult due to the currency storage. This kind of things, it's very important to have an insurance, to have a credit insurance. Next slide, please, DJ. And then the question is, what is a credit insurance? The next slide explains that we are covering certain risk related to commercial transaction. We are speaking of claims. I prefer to speak of risk that we are trying to circumvent. I mentioned it in the previous slide. The client might face your company applying for a tender, winning the tender, might face problems such as non-payment, like contract cancellation at the beginning. You mentioned, Didier, the bond, the bid bond, performance bond. You can have an unfair calling of bond. Other types of risk are what we call, and then it is the next slide, DJ. It's what we call the commercial risk. This kind of claims can be caused by two major reasons. The first, the commercial risk, which means that your counterpart is not able to pay. The other one is what we call the political risk. In short, that's what I said regarding you are exporting in a country facing war, social unrest, problem of transfer of money. This was the other step. In all these cases, the company might face some problem. And what is the answer of Credendo? We provide basically, next slide, please, three kinds of product. And here I'm speaking about the public institution working with the Belgian state guarantee. We provide credit insurance. We provide financing. And this can be financing of the buyer, so your client, buy a buyer credit. For the public tender, for the administration, it's less relevant. But we can finance the exporter himself by providing him the financial he needs, the funding he needs, and then investment insurance. Let's see how the credit insurance works. Here you have in one slide how it works. You have the Belgian exporter having applied for a tender for a South African public buyer. He might have it directly. So then we are covering the risk of non-payment, the risk of cancellation between the Belgian exporter and the South African, in this example, buyer. Our insured might need to have financing from a bank. In that case, we are also covering the bank, which provide the credit to the South African buyer. This credit can be for a very long term, 10 years, 12 years. What we can also do is provide financial guarantee to facilitate access to credit to the Belgian companies, so that with this guarantee, the bank will easily finance the export. If you go to the next slide, and I won't insist on that because it's less relevant for this case. Our direct funding is of less important in terms of public tender. And then I would like to insist on the next slide about the other things that we can do. On the next slide, you will see it's also quite interesting for a company. Next slide, please, Didier. We can provide financial guarantee, which give comfort to the bank to provide a credit to the exporter. So it helps to access the bank financing. And from our side, we share the risk with the bank. It's not of relevance in that case, but we can also provide investment insurance if the company have to invest in the country itself. So DJ, I'm coming to the end of my presentation. What I wanted here to underline is that Credendo can also help give support at the various steps of the applying for a tender by giving information about the country, giving information about the state itself, providing a cover if you have the contract with the country, with the counterpart against the non-payment or the risk of cancellation of the contract. And we can help also in giving finance or help of obtaining finance for the company. And this company might be a big one or also very often a small and medium enterprise. I think that I limited myself to 15 minutes, which is for me a challenge. And I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nabil. I think indeed it was very interesting because people start realizing and can realize now that financial support is available. not only when it comes to B2B opportunities, but also when it concerns public procurement. And that was exactly the intention of inviting you here during our webinar. Now, one of the problems that we discussed about is that it is not that easy to find the exact opportunity on public markets for yourself. If the government of Bangladesh is looking for some particular product, or it concerns the government of an African country like Malawi, if your interest is more in the African market, how do you come to these opportunities? How do you get aware of them? There are a number of platforms online, but most of the time you need to subscribe to them. This means even before getting aware of the opportunity, you're already spending money, and that's a little bit a pity. This is a little bit the loophole where we, as a Belgian Foreign Trade Agency, together with our partners, have jumped into. And as from that perspective on, we have developed a certain tool, which is called Trade for You, which has existed now for the past 4 years. And I'm very proud that I can pass the word to our project manager, Mr. Sami Sioun, who's really an expert on this application, and he will give you a full insight. The bulk of the intervention made by Sami will be made in French, but I will translate whatever is necessary in Dutch. Sami, please.
Oui, bonjour, merci Didier. Donc, je vais commencer par partager mon écran. Voilà. Hop. On voit bien mon écran. So, dear participants, welcome to our webinar and thank you for your interest. Some of you are already aware about how the mobile Trade for You application works, but for the other ones, I will briefly explain how you can use it and all the advantages it can have for your company and your business. Comme Didier l'a dit, je continuerai ma présentation en français maintenant, mais quand nécessaire, Didier prendra la parole en néerlandais pour vous traduire. Donc, premièrement, comment fonctionne notre système? Ce qui est très important, c'est que le profil de votre société soit très bien défini dans notre base de données afin de recevoir la bonne information. Alors, on a différentes informations concernant les sociétés. On a des informations générales, donc le nom de la société, son numéro à la BCE, sa langue, etc. Et si elle est abonnée, oui ou non, à Trade for You. Pour chaque société, nous avons ensuite des contacts. On peut avoir un ou plusieurs contacts au sein d'une même société. Chaque contact est défini par son nom, sa fonction, sa langue et son adresse mail, et si le contact lui-même est abonné à Trade for You ou non. Chaque contact, comme vous le voyez, est relié à ce qu'on appelle un domaine. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'un domaine? Un domaine, c'est vraiment la définition de qu'est-ce que fabrique votre société ou quel service elle fournit. Ici, dans notre exemple, on a un fabricant de pompes solaires. On voit que ce fabricant est déjà actif dans certains pays africains tels le Kenya, le Sénégal et Madagascar, et qu'il est intéressé par tous les autres pays d'Afrique. En parallèle, tous les jours, notre équipe, grâce à des centaines de sources auxquelles nous avons accès, cherche des opportunités d'affaires. Donc, il y a deux grands types d'opportunités d'affaires, les projets internationaux et les appels d'offres. Ceux-ci sont en général supportés par des grandes banques de développement. Alors, dans notre exemple, c'est un appel d'offres pour le Kenya qui concerne à nouveau des pompes solaires et qui est financé par la Banque mondiale. Chaque jour, le système fait le calcul entre le profil des sociétés et les opportunités d'affaires que nous avons trouvées et envoie la bonne information ciblée à la bonne société. Donc, c'est vraiment là qu'il est très important que votre société soit vraiment bien définie précisément pour recevoir vraiment les opportunités d'affaires qui vous concerne spécifiquement.
Samengevat, wat Sami net verteld heeft, is het belang voor een bedrijf om zeer goed haar gegevens mee te delen wanneer u zich abonneert op Trade4You. U komt dan op een totale manier waarbij één, de adresgegevens en de gegevens van het bedrijf, vervolgens ook de contactpersoon en ten derde in welk product en welke landen u handelt. Wat de landen betreft is er uiteraard de landen waar u reeds actief bent, maar ook de landen, en dat is even belangrijk, waar u graag zaken zou gaan doen. Wanneer wij dat weten, ons volledige team, die gaat uit een 500-tal bronnen dagdagelijks de diverse openbare aanbestedingen verzamelen. Dus zowel de tenders van nationale regeringen als de internationale projecten van diverse organisaties. En dan vindt er in het systeem een automatische link plaats. Een klein hypothetisch voorbeeld werd gegeven. De Keniaanse regering vraagt om een zonnepanelenpark op te richten. Uw bedrijf is actief in de zonnepanelensector. Dan wordt dit op een automatische manier met elkaar geconnecteerd en wordt u daarvan op de hoogte gebracht. Wat Sami u nu zal uitleggen hoe dat precies gebeurt.
Voilà, donc quand notre système a fait le calcul de quelle information à envoyer à quelle société, lorsque votre société reçoit sa première opportunité d'affaires, elle reçoit automatiquement un login et un mot de passe à l'application Trade4You, mais vous êtes toujours apte à changer vos préférences par la suite et votre mot de passe par la suite. Dans l'application Trade4You, il y a plusieurs onglets. Le premier onglet concerne les opportunités. Donc ici, vous retrouvez les opportunités qui ont été calculées par le système comme étant spécifiques pour vous. Vous les retrouvez dans l'onglet opportunités. Néanmoins, vous êtes capable de faire différents filtres, donc un filtre par pays par exemple, ou un filtre sur les nouvelles opportunités que vous n'avez pas encore vues jusqu'à présent. Quand vous êtes dans l'opportunité, plusieurs possibilités s'offrent à vous. La première, c'est de demander plus d'informations ou l'avis complet de l'appel d'offres, par exemple. Donc ici, on est toujours dans notre appel d'offres qui concerne le Kenya. Si vous appuyez sur un de ces boutons, cela envoie un mail à nos collègues à l'Agence belge pour le commerce extérieur qui vous envoie alors par la suite l'information complète par mail. Une deuxième grande autre possibilité, c'est la recherche de partenaires pour répondre à cet appel d'offres. En effet, comme Didier l'a dit précédemment, la plupart des sociétés belges sont des SME et ne sont peut-être pas aptes à répondre seules à un appel d'offres. Donc ici, on offre vraiment la possibilité de rechercher des partenaires pour que vous puissiez répondre en consortium à cet appel d'offres, par exemple ici au Kenya concernant des pompes solaires. Didier, on ne t'entend pas, si tu voulais parler.
Excuseer, Sami. Dus kort samengevat werkt de Trade4You-applicatie. U verkrijgt een paswoord en de link naar de applicatie om te installeren op uw mobiele telefoon. Wanneer uw bedrijfsgegevens en een bepaalde opportuniteit met elkaar matchen, dan wordt u daarvan bericht. Dat is een eerste fase. U heeft uiteraard de mogelijkheid, wanneer u ziet dat uw bedrijfsgegevens niet helemaal correct zijn of dat de verkeerde producten, u kan dat aanpassen. U kan ook zeggen, ik zit weliswaar binnen een bepaalde sector, maar ik ben veel meer nog gespecialiseerd. Dus je kan narrowing down doen, zodanig dat u echt wel de juiste opportuniteiten verkrijgt. En dan, wanneer een bepaalde opportuniteit met uw bedrijf gelinkt wordt, komen we terug op ons hypothetisch voorbeeld van de Keniaanse overheid die vraagt voor de installatie van een zonnepanelenpark. Dan krijgt u dit binnen. Dan zijn er drie extra opties die u kan gaan toepassen. U kan met één klik wat meer informatie over de welbepaalde opportuniteit gaan opvragen. Een tweede mogelijkheid is dat u zegt van, ik zie dat wel zitten, maar ik voel me nogal klein om daar alleen aan deel te nemen. Dan kan u via de applicatie aanvragen welke Belgische bedrijven eventueel geïnteresseerd zijn om met u samen te werken, om gezamenlijk deze opportuniteit te gaan benaderen. En verder is het ook nog mogelijk om bij ons op de een of andere manier de lastenboeken en gegevens op te vragen.
Oui, donc c'était un slide un peu après celui-là. Donc, on a un autre onglet dans l'application Trade for You, c'est l'onglet News. Alors ici, on publie de façon régulière des informations. Ces informations proviennent principalement de nos partenaires. Donc, d'un côté, le SPF Affaires étrangères via les ambassades et consulats belges à l'étranger, et aussi grâce à nos partenaires régionaux AWEX, Bruxelles et FIT via les attachés économiques et commerciaux qui sont sur place dans les pays. On publie deux grands types de news. D'abord, des news macroéconomiques, donc sur l'évolution économique dans les différents pays du monde, et alors des legal alertes concernant des changements de régulation sur les exportations, importations dans les différents pays du monde. Un autre avantage de l'application mobile Trade for You qui est peut-être méconnu jusqu'ici, c'est que l'on peut procéder pour vous à la commande de cahier de charges. En effet, souvent, quand un appel d'offres est publié à l'étranger par un ministère ou autre, il faut qu'un représentant de votre société aille sur place pour récupérer les documents de l'appel d'offres. En fait, ici, on travaille à nouveau avec nos partenaires régionaux AWEX, Bruxelles et FIT, et avec le SPF Affaires étrangères via les ambassades et les consulats qui envoient pour vous un représentant pour récupérer l'appel d'offres. Alors, ceci est gratuit si ce n'est évidemment le prix du cahier de charges, parce que de temps en temps, les cahiers de charges sont payants, mais ce ne sera que le prix du cahier de charges et les éventuels frais d'envoi qui vous seront facturés. Cela évite de vous déplacer, de perdre du temps et de dépenser beaucoup d'argent pour aller sur place récupérer le cahier de charges.
Dus naast het aanbieden van tenders wordt er ook nog nieuws aangeboden binnen Trade for You. Wat betekent dat? De informatie die wij verkrijgen van onze diplomatieke posten wereldwijd en die van belang kan zijn voor uw handel, die wordt automatisch doorgestuurd. Als er bijvoorbeeld plots een verbod is op invoer van een bepaald product, u bent net actief in dat product, dan wordt u daar eigenlijk op een quasi instant manier van op de hoogte gehouden. Wat de optie betreft om de lastenboeken voor bepaalde opportuniteiten op te vragen, u kan zich rustig tot ons keren. Wij gaan dan in samenwerking met de diplomatieke posten van buitenlandse zaken, maar ook met de commerciële attachés van onze gewestelijke partners FIT, AWEX en Hub Brussels, wordt ervoor gezorgd dat die lastenboeken opgevraagd worden en naar u worden toegestuurd. En dit tegen de pure kostprijs die een regering eventueel vraagt voor het lastenboek. Dat is zelfs niet altijd zo. Soms zijn die gratis, maar soms wordt er ook een bedrag gevraagd. Wij gaan daar echter geen extra kosten aan toevoegen. Hetgeen betekent dat dit toch een voordeel kan hebben voor onze bedrijven, aangezien zij niet langer hun plaatselijke agent dit moeten gaan laten opvragen of daar tijd, en niet alleen agenten, maar ook niet iemand moeten gaan inhuren om daar het nodige toe te doen. Het komt bij u terecht via de diplomatieke en via de directe weg, rechtstreeks via ons.
Voilà, merci. Et enfin, n'hésitez pas à toujours prendre contact avec nous. Toute notre équipe est là pour répondre à vos questions spécifiques concernant Trade for You, concernant le profil de votre société dans notre base de données. Vous pouvez le faire par email, mais aussi par téléphone. Donc, je vous ai mis des numéros plutôt téléphone francophone et téléphone néerlandophone. Et alors maintenant, je vais laisser aussi la parole à Didier pour expliquer quel intérêt d'être dans notre base de données, même si vous n'êtes pas affilié à Trade4You, parce que là aussi, il y a des avantages à être dans notre base de données. Voilà, merci à vous. Didier, tu es en muet.
Dank u wel, Sammy. Inderdaad, het is niet alleen van belang om een deel uit te maken van Trade4You. Het vergemakkelijkt niet alleen de zaken. Daarnaast houden wij bij het Agentschap Buitenlandse Handel ook het volledige Belgische exporteursbestand bij. So, besides Trade4You, we do have the Belgian Exporters Directory, and it might be important to be a part of that. Quite obviously, we do govern the Belgian Exporters Directory in full compliance with GDPR rules, which means that your statistics are not shared with whomever. But it might be important that when certain possibilities do exist, that we can group people in sectors, that we can group them in accordance with the countries of interest, and in one or the other way, let them know that opportunities exist, or that Belgian companies could derive further advantages from that opportunity. Once again, thank you very much, Sami, for your intervention. As we have already mentioned a couple of times, it's not only the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency and the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that assists our companies. I would even say most part of it is done by the regional agencies who have the full competence in foreign trade. And I'm very glad that as well, AWEX for Wallonia, as FIT for Flanders, do intervene because people are not always aware that our regional agencies only give support in B2B opportunities. They also do that in a far more broader way. Therefore, in the first instance, I'm very glad that I can give the word to Mr. Johan Malin. Mr. Johan Malin from Flanders Investment and Trade, who's responsible for the multinational, international projects within Flanders Investment and Trade. Johan, I give you the word.
Thank you very much, Didier. I'm waiting for you to show me on the screen.
Yeah, the screen share. Okay. It was opening up a little bit longer than I expected, but please.
Okay, so we immediately have the PowerPoint before us. I am Johan Malin of FIT, and I'm working at the department which is called International Financial Institutions. I work there together with my colleagues Arnoud Gijs and Steve Mattens. And we cover, if you listen well to the denomination, IFI, it is International Financial Institutions. So we cover international institutions, but we also cover everything that is financing. And maybe you could even add a third label, that is developing countries, because a big part of our work is on developing countries. This webinar today is on procurement. So where do we go from procurement to international organizations? Well, procurement is everything. Any government can buy anything. But if it is covered, if it is financed and followed up, monitored by an international organization, the procurement will be more transparent. This said, I must say that only half a percentage of the complete procurement in the world is maybe covered by an international organization. That is not much, but there's a lot of advantages to working with international organizations, and that is, well, you already heard an explanation by Credendo on how you can make your bidding and your selling to governments more secure. Well, if we speak about procurement monitored by an international organization, you will be more sure about your payment to the bidding will be competitive and transparent. So everyone in the world can bid, but everyone gets an equal chance to win a contract. Now, we are speaking about international organizations. There's many of them. So the most important international organizations, we speak about almost 100 organizations. And if you take into account the bilateral organizations and the smaller ones, you speak about hundreds of international organizations. So I will try to cover them all. Of course, I have a lot of slides, and I can, if I only read them aloud, I will have more than 15 minutes. So I will have to go very quickly over them. You have 4 big types of international organizations, and it is very important to know because you will not have to follow up on everything. It will depend on the product or service that you are selling. Which one is the most interesting for you. So the first group is a political and scientific international organizations. A second big type is the United Nations system. I speak about the system because there are more than 50 agencies and organizations within the United Nations. You have the whole system of the European Union, where I would make the biggest distinction between projects within the European Union and projects for that are organized outside of the European Union, mostly in neighborhood countries like Southeast Europe or the Mediterranean countries, but also in developing countries. That is what we used to call development aid. And the fourth big type of international organizations are the multilateral development banks. And there you have to make a distinction still between corporate procurement and procurement for investment projects. I will explain that later on this slide. So what is corporate or institutional procurement? It's the buying of products and services that these institutions needs for themselves at the office. So it is very centralized, and we are speaking about the cleaning of buildings, the buying of ICT, office equipment, catering, insurance services, the cleaning. So this is mostly those are working within framework contracts, which means that you, for instance, for the catering, you will bid for a framework contract for say 5 years or maybe even 10 years, and then you will be listed on a list of companies that can be contacted whenever there is cleaning to be done or transportation services to be delivered. What is, of course, very important in the framework of corporate procurement is the distance to the location. If you want to water the plants, you at the headquarters, you will prefer to work with the NATO in Brussels or the European Commission in Brussels, and not with the World Bank in Washington, because unless you have a company in Washington, you don't want to go travel over the ocean anytime you want to water the plants of the World Bank. So the first big type is political and scientific organizations. For OECD and NATO, I will point out little things. OECD is mostly for studies, small studies and consulting, and maybe some software. And for NATO, people who deliver telecommunication service, ICT services, security services will be the most interested. You have to go through the Federal Service of Economy to get a clearance to work with the NATO. This is something that is very specific for NATO. If you want to go cleaning again at the NATO or work at the NATO sites, you will need a clearance from the Ministry of Economy to be able to enter the buildings. So here you have a number of scientific international organizations. I think the colleagues of AWEX will go deeper into that. So what can we do for you? We organize seminars in Brussels. Sometimes we have on-site visits. We already went to visit, for example, European Space Agency in the Netherlands. We have a network of contacts within those agencies and a lot of information sources. If you're interested in this particular field, we can show you the way how to find the opportunities. European institutions. We see 4 big departments within Europe, 4 kinds of projects and tenders you could be interested in. The first one is, well, it's almost the same as the institutional procurement that I talked about. So if you want to deliver directly to the headquarters here in Brussels, that is one kind of procurement. And quite a number of Belgian companies are supplying goods or services to the European Union. So there's a lot of agencies here. You see Frontex maybe as an example. I would encourage you to keep this presentation. I saw the chat. Some people asked if they would get if you will get the presentations. You will get them, and my presentation is particularly a good one to refer to in a later stage. If you say I want to work with European Space Agency, I would go to this presentation, and with one click you will be at the right website. A second type of European projects come from European banks. You have the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, for instance. You have the European Investment Bank. I included some websites here. Go and visit them. You will come immediately to the right page with all the explanations. Then you have all the funding that goes to countries, and some of this funding is administered directly by the European Commission. Very important examples are Horizon 2020, which a lot of our researching companies and laboratories will know. You go there if you are interested in innovation. If you have a clean tech solution for transport, for instance, go to the webpage of Horizon 2020 to see if there are no opportunities for funding for you. And there is also a special agency for small and medium enterprises. It's called COSME. And then also a very important agency, of course, is development aid. What was Europe Aid? It was called Europe Aid before, but now Europe Aid was an independent agency, but now it's incorporated within the Direction General Aid, the Direction General of Europe for International Cooperation and Development. So if you would like to see calls for proposals and tenders within this framework, again, you have the link. We do not have the time now to follow all those links, but feel free to do so after the webinar. And then last but not least, you have the European programs that are administered by the member states themselves. So the money goes to the government of Bulgaria, the government of Czechia. I will not mention Hungary because there have been some issues with the funding for Hungary. But so those governments, they organize, they prepare projects themselves and they implement them, and they do the procurement themselves. So on EU funding, how can FIT support you in this? So we give you information on how to do business with the European Union in general. Think about the four separate systems of doing business with the European Union. We can show you the way, but because if you start surfing on the website of the European Union, you will get lost. Even if you try to surf a small part of this website, you get lost. We can show you the way. What we also do is sometimes is to organize country seminars. For instance, a webinar on a seminar or a webinar on Romania, and then we will invite government people from Romania to talk about the projects they're implementing, or we can in normal times have a business delegations to those countries. We also try to disseminate information on projects and tenders, but we do it as the foreign trade agency is already doing this with the Trade for You in a general way. FIT will do this more in a focused way. That means in the framework of certain projects, in the framework of a certain mission. So for instance, when we have a trade mission to Senegal, then we will try to track as many projects and tenders on Senegal as possible. We will, of course, look at the list of participants of this particular mission. And when we see there's a lot of people in the water sector, then we will really focus on the water sector in Senegal. Also, when we go there, we will visit the offices of the World Bank, the European Union, because I'm still speaking about the European Union here. We will try to visit their offices to talk about all those projects. There's the organization of brokerage events. It has already been said a few times. You need a partner if you want to work in developing countries in particular, or if you're a smaller company that has not the power to work directly with a government or with an international institution. It may be good for you to partner with another company, especially within the European Union. Well, during these events, you can find a partner, or you could try to do that through the EEN, Europe Enterprise Network database. That's another means to find foreign partners. So I go quickly to the United Nations now. I already told you there's a lot of agencies within the United Nations. You see the overview here, so just to give you an impression on how many there are. Belgium works with, especially with UNICEF. UNICEF is the biggest market for Belgian companies, but this is only because Belgium produces a lot of vaccines, and UNICEF buys a lot of vaccines. So in the current crisis, we are well positioned to not only for the production of vaccines, but also for distribution of vaccines. By the way, the United Nations is, of course, a lot involved in the COVID-19 vaccine, in the development, but also in the distribution, because they already have a fund to look for developing countries to make sure that they can have access to vaccines and equipment. So again, a number of essential links for the United Nations. The starters website, click on it. You will. It's very clear how you have to work with that. You have a tab to register yourself for the United Nations systems, for all agencies, by the way, because this is a centralized database. You have a tender alert service, you have a lot of documentation. You can go through the statistics of what is sold to the United Nations agency, by agency, by products, by country. So this is definitely the place to start your overview. So how do we support you for UN procurement? We have some basic services, show you the way through the website, which is a lot easier than the website of the European Union, honestly. We can support you when you register for UNGM. We can show you how to do that. By the way, when you register for UNGM, you will already find out if you have products that are bought by them, because you will not find the products within their lists if they're not don't buy them. And then again, we organize a lot of seminars, webinars, missions. We had a mission to Geneva on health with the World Health Organization and the Red Cross. We had a mission to Copenhagen where we met with a lot of agencies and had B2B with those agencies, of course, together with our friends from AWEX and Hub Brussels. Last but not least, you have the multilateral development banks. We are talking about the World Bank here, about African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, and a lot of smaller ones. You have the overview here. Within the World Bank is the biggest and the most important one. It is also the most transparent one, I think. Even within this World Bank group, you have IBRD, which provides loans to middle-income developing countries. IDA, which gives loans to the poorest countries, and IFC and MIGA, which are there for the private sector. I think that MIGA is there to do almost the same thing as Credendo, but I would say that MIGA will start where Credendo ends, as the World Bank has a lot of leverage towards those governments, they will take a little bit more risk. Where is the World Bank Group working in the world? Well, the importance of Africa has grown over the last decade, I must say. Africa was the smallest amount 10 years ago, apart from Europe, Central Europe, but now it is really the biggest portion of the money goes to Africa these days. What is important to know about those institutions is that they work in a decentralized way. So they give money to governments, and the governments prepare projects and buy projects. This takes a lot of time. This is a 6-year cycle. So it is really important to see the difference between a project and a tender. A project can take 6 years, and within this time frame, thousands of tenders can be issued for this one project, and that is very important to know. And also important to know is that you have to follow up on a project from the start, especially if you're a consultant. If you're a consultant, you should already almost know about the project before the information is published, which you can do by reading the strategies, the country strategies. But when, again, if you have questions on this, you can always contact FIT. We are there to guide you. So this slide is maybe the most important one of them all. When we're talking about multilateral development banks, there is no contact between the World Bank or the African Development Bank or the Asian Development Bank and the supplier. The World Bank gives the money to the country, to the government of the country. They create an implementing agency, and they are the ones that publish the tender and that go through all the whole tendering process. The only thing that the World Bank will do is to monitor this process, to see if it happens, it all goes in a transparent way, and if there is no corruption. And the only time that you will contact the World Bank is if you think that there is corruption. If you think that your competitor gave some money to a government official, or if you think that something happened, you have a good price and good quality, and you did not win, then you may contact the procurement department of the World Bank. So this is the whole circle. I say 6 year, it may be 4 year, it may be 8 year, but this is the whole complicated circle that every project go through. And on any stage you have different documents that are published, which can give you information. If you see the blue at the right, you have project preparation. There you have 3 very, very important documents. The monthly operational summary, which tells you which projects will come up. And then the project identification document and the project okay, I forgot what the A is for. But anyway, all those documents give you a lot of information on the project, and can give you an idea if you are able to sell or not. These are all links you can follow if you have a particular interest for the World Bank. Please contact us if you're hesitating. We can explain you what all this brouhaha means. Didier, I don't know if I have still the time to go through the do's and don'ts. Hello.
Yes, shortly, Johan.
Very shortly. So
yes.
The do's is reflect on this market. Don't start with it if you don't really have the time to work on it. It has been said before by Sammy, I think. You almost have to dedicate one person within your company to follow up on those projects. If not, it doesn't make sense. Don't underestimate the investment in time and money. So all those projects, they are for small and medium enterprises, yes, but only if you really have an added value. If you are really the specialist on something, then you can go and bid yourself for a tender. If you are small and if you are making solar panels, excuse me, but there's a lot of competition on the market, and then you would really have to search for a partner which has some force behind it. So yes, you will have to do a lot of subcontracting. You will have to be selective when you follow up on countries and sectors. Ideally, you have a lot of experience in those countries. Then you will say, but if I start, how do I gather the experience? Well, you work together with partners. That's how you get this experience. You have to have constant contact with the local government. If you don't do that yourself, do it through the local partner. I saw something, I think it was Sammy who showed a slide where he said that use a template. Use a template and then you can work quickly. Yes, it's good to have a template to answer a bid. But there is a danger too. If you think that with one template document you can answer to all the bids, it will not work like that. You have to show that you understand what the project is about and that you understand all the technical specifications. Also, you do not offer more than asked for. If something is asked and you say, oh, but I have a better solution, do not write that in your bid documents. Do not write it down. Maybe you can put it in an annex, but it does not work like that. So you have to follow up on countries and customs. That is very normal. You have to be complete in your documents and timely. Layout is important, and a correct usage of language is important. Do not think, okay, I'm not a British company, so they will be flexible on my language. Do not think that, because they look at it really. You can always contact an executing agency to have clarifications on a tender, but not when the tendering is running. So you have to take into account the limit to ask for clarifications. And it has already been said, the embassies and the economic representatives of the regions can do a lot for of you. You heard the service that the embassies are offering of buying bid documents in your place free at charge. If you want some follow-up on the tenders sent to you by Trade4You, please contact FIT, and we will try to support you. Okay, the don'ts are a bit evident. They are the opposite of what I said before. So what does FIT do for you? We first of all, we will try to tell you if it is worth for you to spend your time on public procurement and organized by the multilateral development banks and other international institutions. Don't lose your time. I have the example of a company that sold school boards, and well, after showing the way to this company on the website of the World Bank, after 2 years, we found out that the World Bank does not buy school boards. So they will never issue a tender for school board. So we will try to guide you through this process. We will guide you through the websites. There's a lot of websites, but once you know your way, it's okay. We have hands-on interactive workshops on the strategy and the sourcing of opportunities. So we see this is a roadmap. First, you have an introduction seminar. Then we will learn you how to write good bids. Then maybe we will have a mission to Washington to visit the World Bank, and the last trajectory would be to let you participate at missions in developing countries and visit the World Bank and the other IFI and the governments in the country. So sorry if I took a bit more time.
Oh, just slightly, Johan, but there's no problem. Thank you very much for your intervention. I do want to point out that this intervention was specifically on international projects from multilateral organizations, which is not to be confounded with purely national tenders. There was a question from someone who said to me in the beginning, you encouraged SMEs to participate in public. Now we get the feeling that we should not do it. I think there has to
no, that was not the purpose. I also said that only 0.5% of the tenders that are issued worldwide are monitored by those international institutions. Huh? So it's a good first step, but there's a whole world of procurement behind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so this was specifically on multilateral institutions like the European Union, World Bank. There are also national governments, which quite obviously do have their independent tendering processes. This brings us to the AWEX side, and I would gladly give the word now to Claire Lammens and Patrick Heinrichs from AWEX. I'm going to see whether I can immediately share your presentation. Claire, that should be done now.
Ok, c'est parfait. Merci Didier. Donc, je vais rappeler un petit peu le contexte. Il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont déjà été dites avant de m'intéresser plus particulièrement au marché qu'on appelle les big science. La diapositive suivante, s'il te plaît. Oui, voilà. Donc, justement, donc, il y a certains marchés de niche qu'on va détailler et une de celles-ci est constituée par le marché des big science. Donc, la suivante, je vais m'attarder un petit peu sur cette diapositive-ci parce que c'est pour rappeler d'une part le contexte des marchés publics internationaux. On a dit c'est plus de 15% du PIB mondial, donc c'est quand même assez important. Et certains de ces marchés sont évidemment beaucoup plus attractifs que les autres. Ce sont les marchés qu'on appelle des organisations internationales. Alors, on l'a déjà dit, mais je crois que c'est pas mal non plus de le rappeler. Les marchés des organisations internationales présentent beaucoup moins de risques que les autres. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y a quelque part toujours derrière la garantie de l'organisation internationale. Et cette garantie, elle porte sur quoi? Elle porte sur une certaine transparence dans les procédures et aussi elle porte sur des garanties quelque part de paiement. Alors évidemment, il y a aussi des garanties parce que le risque politique est évidemment moins important puisqu'il y a toujours ces organisations internationales qui sont derrière, en arrière-fond. Alors évidemment, il y a une facilité d'accès à ces marchés publics parce qu'ils sont souvent publiés sur des sites en anglais. Donc par rapport à toutes les tenders qui circulent dans le marché, dans tous les marchés internationaux, donc d'avoir des informations déjà en anglais, c'est évidemment aussi plus facile pour les entreprises. Alors, ce marché des OI, il n'est pas du tout homogène. Il y a c'est intéressant de repérer des niches. Alors, pour le segmenter finalement, hein, c'est ce qu'on fait un petit peu dans toutes les études de marché. On regarde ce qu'il y a out there et puis on essaye de voir où on peut s'insérer. Et pour voir où on peut s'insérer, c'est intéressant toujours de regarder une certaine homogénéité. Pour cette homogénéité, on peut utiliser des critères. Par exemple, on peut utiliser le critère d'organisation internationale qui partagent une même plateforme d'achat. Donc, ça a été dit hein, par FIT. Le système onusien, il y a un certain... Non, c'est toujours la première diapositive, on va y rester longtemps. Donc, le système onusien, il y a une plateforme qui s'appelle United Nations UNGM, Global Market. Et donc, cette plateforme, si on est référencé sur cette plateforme, on est référencé quelque part comme fournisseur pour à peu près une quarantaine d'agences qui font partie du système ONU. Donc, c'est évidemment très intéressant. Et donc, ça, c'est une manière de segmenter le marché par le fait qu'elles partagent une même plateforme d'achat. Une autre manière de segmenter le marché, justement, c'est ce qui concerne les banques de développement. Et ça, on en a parlé aussi à la présentation précédente, il y a tout un cycle de projets qui fait que on peut, si on se trouve très en amont, on peut avoir accès à des informations déjà même avant que le projet ne naisse sur place. Et donc ça, c'est par exemple le rôle de notre réseau. Donc de comprendre ce cycle de projet, qui va intervenir quand et comment, c'est quand même aussi assez important. Alors une autre manière de segmenter le marché serait par rapport aux procédures d'achat. Et donc, par exemple, les institutions européennes partagent toutes les mêmes procédures d'achat. Donc, il y a une certaine homogénéité là-dedans. Une fois qu'on les connaît, eh bien, on sait exactement à quoi ça s'entendre, à partir de quel seuil les tenders sont publiés ou pas. Et alors, enfin, une autre manière de segmenter le marché, c'est, comme on l'a dit un petit peu, par le type de besoins qu'ont ces organisations, les secteurs. Par exemple, les organisations sécurité-défense ont le même type de besoins et il faut parfois, oui, une clearance pour pouvoir les fournir. Ou les organisations internationales du sport qui travaillent sur un secteur bien précis ou d'autres organisations internationales un petit peu plus thématiques. Alors, à quoi sert de les segmenter? Et ce n'est pas suffisant de repérer des niches qui sont un petit peu homogènes, il faut encore analyser ce marché. Tout ça donc dans le but de pouvoir prioriser et cibler, parce que ça ne sert à rien de les poursuivre toutes ou de les suivre toutes. Donc, il y en a plus de 200, au sens très, très large d'organisation internationale. Donc, on va essayer d'analyser à qui elles achètent, quoi et à qui. Donc, ça sont des questions très, très importantes. Et pour ça, on va analyser donc, les statistiques d'achat de ces organisations. Ça a été mentionné aussi par Johan. Les statistiques d'achat des Nations Unies sont une bible d'information. Et donc, si on les analyse de manière assez fine, on peut regarder les volumes d'achat, mais aussi, par exemple, il y a des organisations qui achètent sur place localement. Par exemple, le World Food Programme achète beaucoup plus de biens à peu près, c'est une très, très grande proportion de biens et services localement, tandis que d'autres organisations, donc localement dans les pays en développement. Tandis que d'autres organisations achètent plus aux pays développés. Donc ça, c'est important. En santé, les plus grands acheteurs ne sont pas ceux qu'on croit. Ce n'est pas l'OMS, c'est plutôt l'UNICEF. Et même quand on enlève aussi le facteur vaccin, etc., et qu'on s'attache aux autres achats, on voit que PAHO, donc l'Organisation panaméricaine de santé, achète plus que l'OMS. Donc, c'est très intéressant de voir ces statistiques et de les analyser. Donc, c'est ce qu'on fait aussi à la WEX, mais toutes les entreprises peuvent quelque part un peu faire leur devoir pour voir dans les catégories des biens qu'ils fournissent ou des services qu'ils fournissent, quels sont les plus grands acheteurs. Toutes ces informations sont disponibles. Et donc, tout ça, ça sert à cibler et prioriser les organisations qu'on va suivre peut-être plus que d'autres. Et alors à ce moment-là, donc la WEX va organiser des actions précises qui sont du même type que FITE, puisqu'on fait beaucoup de choses en partenariat comme Belgique. Donc, on va être souvent en train de faire des séminaires ou des missions vers ces organismes en partenariat avec les agences régionales. Mais donc, ça, c'est la pointe de l'iceberg, parce que ce que la WEX fait en arrière-plan, c'est agir sur la demande, donc en regardant, je vous dis, par le réseau, les attachés commerciaux qui sont sur place dans un pays, ils ont toujours un œil ouvert sur ce qui se passe dans les projets avant qu'ils ne naissent ou quand ils commencent à être constitués. Donc, c'est déjà là qu'on a pas mal d'informations. Et alors, nous aussi, on fait des analyses des offres qui passent et on essaye de les passer, de les envoyer aux entreprises qui seraient susceptibles d'être intéressées. Donc là, on agit donc au niveau de la demande et des besoins de ces organisations internationales. On agit aussi au niveau de l'offre. On essaye de structurer un petit peu l'offre wallonne, donc soit par ligne, par secteur, par grappe, pour voir celles qui sont plus susceptibles de répondre à tel ou tel besoin de telle ou telle organisation. Donc ça, c'est évidemment aussi quelque chose d'important qu'on fait. Voilà. Alors, on peut passer à la diapositive suivante. Alors, donc, on a vu qu'une de ces niches, un de ces marchés importants, c'est ce qu'on appelle les big science. Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est les big science? Ce sont des infrastructures de recherche internationaux qui sont actifs dans des domaines scientifiques de pointe. Donc, c'est-à-dire que ce sont des infrastructures, laboratoires, etc., qui ont des besoins d'investissement colossaux, des investissements qui ne peuvent pas être faits simplement par une structure privée ou publique toute seule. Et donc, ça sera financé par plusieurs États ou des agences internationales, tellement ces investissements sont importants. Autre caractéristique, il y aura des chercheurs du monde entier qui vont travailler dans ces organisations. Alors, ils travaillent dans quel domaine? Ben, ça peut être des domaines de pointe, hein, donc vraiment pointe de l'innovation, la physique des particules, la fusion nucléaire, donc pas la fission, celle dont on a l'habitude dans les centrales, la fusion, c'est-à-dire comme le soleil, une énergie très bon marché et perpétuelle, le spatial, la biologie, l'astronomie, donc des domaines vraiment de pointe. Alors, il y a toute une série d'exemples de celles qui constituent les plus importantes, qui est le marché qu'on cible pour l'instant, qui sont les big science européennes, mais il faut savoir qu'il y en a partout dans le monde. Il y en a aux États-Unis, il y en a en Asie, donc si on a des références dans les européennes, eh bien c'est une bonne nouvelle parce qu'on peut aller vendre ensuite ailleurs dans le monde. Alors il y en a qui sont très connus, donc le CERN à Genève, donc l'ESA, l'Agence spatiale européenne, qui a plusieurs sites, dont un en Belgique, donc l'ESO, hein, l'observatoire qui a 3 sites au Chili et dont les headquarters se trouvent en Allemagne. Il y en a qui sont un petit peu moins connus ou des technologies aussi moins connues. Donc par exemple ESS, European Spallation Source. Donc ils travaillent sur la dispersion de neutrons, mais ce sont des applications qui ont à voir avec l'énergie, les télécommunications, les biotech, même la santé. Et donc, eux se trouvent, ils ont leurs installations en Suède, leurs analyses de données à Copenhague, et ils ont un centre qui fabrique à Bilbao, donc en Espagne. Alors, il y a aussi European XFEL, qui est un laser à électrons libres, qui produisent des jets de rayons X depuis 2017. Alors, il y a ESRF qui se trouve à à Grenoble. Donc ça, c'est un faisceau synchrotron. Travaille aussi donc des applications au niveau de la physique, mais de la biologie, de la géologie, de la médecine, de l'archéologie. Donc il y a parfois des applications qui sont assez étonnantes. Alors, donc il y a l'ILL de Grenoble, qui est un centre mondial en technologie neutronique. Pareil, hein, donc application, donc c'est de la recherche appliquée, surtout application en biologie, chimie verte, matériaux, physique nucléaire, physique des particules. Alors aussi une institution intéressante, F4E, donc Fusion for Energy. Donc c'est l'agence qui se trouve à Barcelone et qui gère la contribution de tous les pays d'Europe, donc la contribution européenne à ITER. ITER, c'est un réacteur de fusion nucléaire qui est en construction en France, à Caradache. Et donc, il y a plusieurs groupes, il y a des pays, donc il y a les États-Unis, il y a la Corée, il y a l'Inde, il y a la Chine, qui interviennent soit en nature, soit en donnant des fonds. Et donc, F4E, c'est l'organisation qui gère la contribution de l'Europe. Donc, ITER est maintenant, donc l'infrastructure est en train de se construire maintenant. Alors, donc EMBL, ce sont des laboratoires de plutôt biologie moléculaire. Il y a 6 sites en Europe et donc il y aura expansion dans le site espagnol et anglais. Donc c'est très intéressant de les suivre parce qu'en général, les investissements augmentent toujours. Voilà, donc alors la diapositive suivante. Alors, l'attrait de ce marché. Il y a beaucoup de besoins et il y a un paradoxe parce que finalement, il y a peu d'entreprises qui répondent. Et donc, les big science se trouvent face à un problème finalement, qu'elles ont des offres d'achat. Elles voudraient bien acheter des choses, mais il y a peu de gens qui osent s'y risquer. Pourquoi? Alors, elles font peur. Ça a l'air d'être absolument quelque chose d'inaccessible. Alors, c'est pour ça qu'on va un petit peu voir ensemble comment pouvoir leur fournir, parce que c'est finalement assez facile. Alors, quel est l'attrait aussi de ce marché? Donc, c'est des marchés de volume. Donc, vous voyez 38 400 millions d'euros entre 2020 et 2024 pour l'ensemble des institutions dont on a parlé. Et donc, c'est une somme énorme, bien évidemment, et donc, il va encore augmenter. Alors, il y a évidemment des opportunités commerciales. Elles cherchent des fournitures, mais aussi elles cherchent des partenariats technologiques. Ce qui est avantageux aussi, c'est que les PME, si on a toujours parlé les PME, alors ici justement, ces grandes institutions aiment bien les PME parce que comme ce sont des domaines de pointe et des domaines très innovants, elles ont besoin face à elles d'entreprises qui sont très flexibles et savent réagir. Donc, parfois, il y a un prototype qui va être constitué dans les laboratoires de ces grands organismes, quelque chose dont ils ont besoin. Après, ils vont mettre peut-être 1 mois pour le fabriquer. Et puis, c'était l'exemple de certains supraconducteurs au CERN. Et puis après, ils vont demander à l'industrie, fabriquez-moi ça. Et donc, c'est l'occasion aussi pour l'industrie d'être très flexible et de pouvoir mettre son savoir-faire à profit. Donc, c'est tout à fait ouvert aux PME. Ce sont des achats qui sont planifiés pour beaucoup d'années et qui sont transparents. Bien sûr, les procédures sont complètement transparentes. Ça fournit des références impressionnantes. Et alors ici, c'est le joker. Ce sont des marchés qui sont quelque part un peu captifs pour les sociétés belges. Pourquoi? Je vous ai dit que ces institutions sont financées par des États. Donc la Belgique finance la plupart d'entre eux. Et il y a un principe qui n'est pas valable pour toutes, mais pour la plupart, oui, et qui est le principe du retour industriel équitable. Ça veut dire que le pays Belgique doit recevoir en contrat industriel une partie qui est proportionnelle à son investissement au fond qu'elle met dedans. Donc ça, c'est très intéressant parce que les sociétés belges sont pour l'instant bien positionnées parce qu'il n'y en a pas assez qui fournissent par rapport à ce que la Belgique serait en droit de recevoir. Donc tout ça fait que c'est un marché qui est accessible et vraiment très, très intéressant. Diapositive suivante, s'il vous plaît, Didier. Oui, donc alors voilà, qu'est-ce qu'elles achètent? Alors, elles font des achats classiques pour leur fonctionnement, donc c'est tout ce qui est plutôt administratif, etc. Mais alors, elles achètent évidemment aussi pour tous leurs projets. Et ça, c'est quoi? C'est énergie, électricité, électronique, des capteurs, des outils de diagnostic, des aimants, tout ce qui est connectivité, supraconducteurs, alors aussi des services big data, ICT, tout ce qui a à voir avec les salles blanches, technologie du vide, du froid, l'optique, de l'ingénierie, de la mécanique de précision, donc la robotique. Il y a pas mal de choses en fait qui sont susceptibles d'être achetées. Alors la diapositive suivante. Alors justement, comment avoir accès à ces opportunités? Comment est-ce qu'on les contacte? Alors finalement, c'est assez facile. Donc il y a moyen de les contacter en direct via leur site web ou certaines d'entre elles organisent ce qu'on appelle des Industry Days. C'est le cas de l'ESA. Donc, ce sont par exemple 2 jours sur soit un thème précis quand elles font une expansion ou quand elles ont un nouveau projet, ou soit de manière générale sur leurs achats. Et donc, en général, c'est sur place. Et la WEX participe à ces Industry Days de l'ESA, par exemple. Alors aussi, ces organismes sont présents dans certaines foires, par exemple la Novermess. Alors l'autre manière de les contacter, et ça c'est évidemment très important aussi, le plus important, c'est via le réseau de ILOs. Donc ça c'est Industrial Liaison Officer. Donc ces personnes sont accréditées auprès de l'organisme pour tisser des liens avec l'industrie. Donc c'est leur job. La WEX, par exemple, compte 2 ILOs dans son réseau, à Genève pour le CERN et en Suède pour ESS. Et donc, et aussi, par exemple, Christian Dirix d'Agoria est ILO pour F4E et ITER. Donc, Belspo aussi a du personnel qui est à ILO pour l'Institut Lot Langevin à Grenoble et ERCRF et aussi pour ESA. Donc, c'est quelqu'un de Belspo. Donc, c'est très important de s'adresser à eux et eux vont aussi s'adresser aux entreprises quand l'industrie leur demande de faire du sourcing. Ces organismes ont aussi ce qu'on appelle des Technology Transfer Officers. et ce sont des personnes qui, elles, vont plus spécifiquement s'attacher au transfert de technologie. Et donc, avant de parler de la dernière catégorie, je vais parler justement aussi du réseau d'incubateurs, l'ESA ou le CERN, à ce qu'on appelle des BIC, des Business Incubators. Et donc là, c'est aussi pour pouvoir, pour que l'industrie ait accès à certaines technologies. Et alors enfin, et ça c'est très très important, ce sont les forums d'affaires conjoints. Donc je vous ai dit, il y a une demande de ces organismes pour avoir des contacts avec l'industrie. Donc, ils se sont mis ensemble, leurs acheteurs de tous ces organismes se sont finalement mis ensemble. Et donc, il y a une initiative, la première fois à Copenhague en 2018, d'organiser ce Big Science Business Forum où tout le monde se rassemble et explique ce dont ils ont besoin et à quel délai et qui est susceptible de fournir. Et donc, le prochain était prévu en 2020 à Grenade, mais il a été reporté à cause du Covid en fin septembre 2021. L'AWEX, avec ses partenaires, dont FitUp, Belspo, Agoria, aura un stand là-bas. Alors donc, oui, justement, on arrive à la dernière diapositive. Alors ça, c'est la Bible des Big Science. Donc, vous avez le lien est un peu long, je m'excuse, mais vous trouvez là-dedans dans le Procurement Handbook, il y a une présentation des organismes, quelles sont leurs procédures d'achat, qui il faut contacter, qu'est-ce qu'ils achètent, pour combien, quand. Donc, c'est vraiment la Bible et je vous encourage vraiment beaucoup à aller le consulter. Donc, moi, j'en ai terminé. Je passe la parole à Patrick.
Ja, excuseer, dus ik ga Frans spreken gezien dat die product voor Waalse bedrijf geschikt is. Donc, je voulais d'abord préciser que par rapport à tout ce qu'a expliqué extrêmement bien Johan Malin de FIT, donc au niveau de la WEX, nous faisons évidemment la même chose pour les sociétés wallonnes. Alors, on a eu beaucoup de présentations très, très intéressantes. Alors, vous avez normalement deux profils, vous qui nous écoutez, ou bien vous n'avez pas encore participé à des public procurement, ou bien vous avez déjà participé. Et donc, le public procurement, c'est comme le vélo. D'abord, il faut vouloir faire du vélo. Après, le vélo, c'est facile, mais quand vous allez essayer au début, vous allez tomber. Et donc, c'est mieux d'avoir quelqu'un pour vous aider pour commencer. Après, quand vous saurez faire du vélo, même les professionnels, ils ont des coachs. Parce que même quand vous savez faire du vélo, après, avoir un coach vous permet d'atteindre un niveau supérieur. Et donc, le slide suivant, s'il te plaît, Didier. Ce que nous avons donc créé à la WEX en collaboration avec la Sofinex, c'est un subside qui vous permet de recruter un expert qui va donc vous aider à répondre à ces appels d'offres qui sont financés par des organisations internationales. Je ne vais pas rentrer, surtout que comme on a un peu dépassé les délais, je ne vais pas rentrer dans les détails de ce subside. Il y a une série de conditions, vous en voyez certaines sur le slide. Donc le plus simple, c'est si vous êtes intéressé, c'est de me contacter puisque dans le slideshow, vous avez mes coordonnées. Sachez simplement que donc ce subside va vous permettre de financer donc de 60% des coûts de l'expert qui va vous aider. Alors je vais quand même donner vite quelques exemples de sociétés qui ont fait appel à ce subside. On a d'abord une société qui donc a un secteur d'activité déterminé et qui voulait utiliser l'expert pour faire justement des surveilles, des alertes, créer des alertes sur un secteur, un marché spécifique dans des pays spécifiques qui voulaient que cet expert les aide à participer aux appels d'offres, savoir comment il fallait répondre à l'appel d'offres, à quoi il fallait faire attention. Donc, répondre à un appel d'offres, si vous ne l'avez jamais fait, je peux vous dire, l'ayant fait moi-même, que c'est assez compliqué, time consuming, et que la première fois que vous le faites, vous suez des gouttes. Donc, c'est mieux d'être aidé. Voilà. Je m'arrête ici parce que sinon, on va terminer vraiment beaucoup trop tard. Mais donc, vous avez mes coordonnées. Si cela vous intéresse ou si vous avez besoin d'une aide générale pour tout ce qui concerne le public procurement au sens le plus large, parce qu'on a parlé de beaucoup de choses aujourd'hui, vous pouvez nous contacter si vous êtes donc une société wallonne et contacter mes collègues de FID et de Bruxelles si vous êtes une société flamande ou bruxelloise. Merci.
Thank you so much, Patrick and Claire. I think it was a really interesting intervention, as well as Johan Malin. A little bit long, indeed, but it's so important to know what exactly is going around with these international projects, and I think this was really helpful. Lastly, but certainly not least, and Patrick, you gave the perfect pass to me, and I only have to score the goal because lastly we will go over to an expert, double master in international law, and I experienced myself a brilliant student. Mr. George Shabib was active or is active for the past more than 20 years in public procurement and in one of the most difficult regions worldwide, a really broad region where some richness and poverty or uncertainty collide together. But he can, and this is, I think, very interesting, from the field, give some tips and tricks and share about his experiences as he has been a representative for Basics and Tata for one of the largest multinationals, but also for PMEs in respect of representing them in international procurement. George.
Thank you, Didier. Hello, everyone. So I will make my presentation in English, and I'll try to be also as short as possible since I think it's already late for everyone. So Didier asked me to basically try to be concrete and speak about a particular region, the Middle East and North African region, the region that I know a little bit. I can't pretend to know all of the countries in the MENA region. And indeed, I've practiced some public procurement in this region, in some of those countries. So first, I will try to give a brief explanation about the MENA region. What is the MENA region? Some of the information I will give will probably be trivial to some of you, so I will be short. Then I will try to see with you why look at public procurement in the MENA region. Then I will look briefly at potential risk that most of them I've encountered, and then try to see with you how to mitigate those risks. So first, MENA region, MENA, Middle East and North Africa. It's a big market, many countries. If I look at the World Bank, they consider that it goes from Algeria to Iran, 18 countries. Strangely, it includes Malta in it, although it's a European country. Some people try to extend the MENA region, to include the Turkey, Sudan, some of the, African countries. But basically, it's the Northern African countries and the Middle East. It's a big region, but it has very weak regional integration. Actually, inter-region trade is very, very small. It's a culturally and economically, politically very diverse. Gulf countries are different from, let's say Morocco. The population is actually 450 million people. It's almost similar to the European Union, but it's a very young age country. So the two-thirds is less than 35 years old. Unemployment rate is very high, though, and mostly touching the women. Then its total GDP in the region is 3.7 trillion USD. It's actually 4 times smaller than the European Union. European Union, I think it's 15.7. it has witnessed in 2020, like many other part of the world, growth contraction at minus 1.1 according to the last estimates. It's mostly due to the COVID crisis, but also to oil price plummeting. And so, which means that it's actually very highly correlated to oil price. The region has 60% of global oil reserves and 45% of natural gas. It's probably going to increase in the future, since you all know that we have big discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean in gas and oil. Public debt is relatively low, but it's increasing. It's 45% of GDP and going to 58%. Obviously, it depends on which country you're talking. Some, Gulf countries might have lower debt to GDP, but other countries like, I don't know, Lebanon for now has actually a debt crisis. Current account is actually on average minus 4.8%, and the countries have seen a high fiscal deficit. Current account is negative it depends also on which country you're talking about. Like oil exporting countries will probably have a current account surplus, like balance of payment surplus, and other will have a negative one. It's an important issue when you look at public procurement, since those countries are, many of those countries are getting short in hard currencies, and you want to be paid in hard currencies. Next slide. Yes. So the question is, why looking at PPP in MENA? There are many reasons, but the one I see is actually, first, it's a neighboring market, so it's actually easy to access. You can't go obviously watering plants there, as Johan discussed, but it's still close to fly there. It's culturally and linguistically close. There are connections. The public procurement to GDP is actually high. It's 15 to 20%, and in some countries even higher. Like GDP in Egypt, for instance, it's even higher. Another reason to look at that is that, and this it was already discussed by some of the panelists, is that many of those procurement are financed by international organization, World Bank, also by European countries and the European Bank. Another reason to look at it is actually the European Commission has been it's actually pushing for to open actually public procurement in those markets through multilateral initiative like the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership or the GCC dialogue, or other bilateral agreement, or through the WTO GPA. But it's still, as you all know, the market is the opening public procurement market is very difficult. It's actually, for Europe, it's not a big market, but still, it's probably easier to open those markets, the Mediterranean market, for Europe than opening, I don't know, Chinese market and other even US market. We have witnessed actually some positive evolutions in also thanks to the World Bank and European Commission work and so on. So those countries had modernized and simplified a lot of their procedures in public procurement. We've seen also a lot of new e-government procurement portals, a lot of online portals. So access to information, but also procuring is getting easier in some of the countries, not all of them, but for instance, Morocco, Tunisia are good examples, or some of the Gulf countries. We've seen also a growing, expertise in those markets, which is actually important, because a lot of those countries wants to issue public procurement, but it's not always efficient, and the documentation, you can see it translated in the documentation. Other evolution, we've seen an improvement in the legal framework, like clearly in the better, more concern in fair competition, better transparency in some of the countries, governance, anti-bribery laws. It's still grim. I mean, it's not that, but it's clearly better. And we've seen also a lot of, in a lot of the countries, actually, it's becoming a political issue. Like some countries, you've seen a revolution and uprising against, corruption. And we will see later that this is one of the issues we have to look at. Procurement, yeah, so I'll go to the other, so next slide. Yeah, so I would just wanted to add that we have like PPP's framework also are evolving. Clearly, those countries are trying to improve their SMEs footprint. So they're targeting clearly SMEs. Since we spoke a lot about SMEs, they're trying to use their purchasing powers through public procurement to help grow the SMEs footprint. So basically lowering the barriers to entry to public procurement for SMEs. Another trend we see is also trying to cut to public procurement tendering into lots, like smaller lots to open it to SMEs. And we have also seen many countries breaking, those big monopolies, these big corporations that had, import exclusivities and so on. So clearly we see a trend toward SMEs. So now I would like to look at, some of the risks that I've mostly encountered, and many of the people listening have encountered. So first, risk, clearly economic, social, and political unrest. So economic, we've seen, inflation as an issue for some of the companies. Current account deficit, fiscal deficit. Clearly, when you win, a project and then you have to execute it, and you've seen, inflation on some of the materials and so on. For instance, in construction, but also in the workforce, it's actually a big issue. Likewise, political is an important issue when you look at the market, at these markets. Clearly, political instabilities, wars, terrorism, expropriation, new laws and regulation, or international events. I don't know, like some country in some random newspaper in your country, publish caricatures or whatever. You find yourself into a political issue, or one of your shareholders, I don't know, I'll give you one example. In Qatar, after the boycott, some companies had like one project, and then, one of the shareholders is a part of the, is one of the country that is boycotting Qatar. So you might find yourself in trouble. Social unrest, wages. We've seen, for instance, in the execution of some of the projects won through public procurement. With the COVID crisis, a lot of the countries closed their borders, so you can't actually bring in your workers, your staff, and so on. So we've seen wages increasing dramatically in some of those countries. So it's actually impacting the execution of your project. Next slide, please. Financial risk, we've touched upon, Credendo, Nabil spoke about a lot of these issues. Clearly, budget deficit, balance of payment deficit in the country, monetary risk, but also the payment delays. We've seen that a lot, payment delayed, but also additional claims. When you execute the project, the client, increase the scope, you have additional claims, and then sometimes you face a lot of difficulties to actually get those claims paid and your bills paid, and it's a big burden. Performance bonds, we've discussed that. Cash retention, like it's, for instance, I don't know, it's one of the traps we've seen. You get, you have in your procurement, in your contract, cash retention. And you find yourself at the end trying to negotiate with the client the bond release or the cash release, and it often ends up into a negotiation because the client tries to squeeze you a little bit, and it can get frustrating. Before going to Credendo, you obviously, will be negotiating because you want to, still remain in the market because you don't want to, go into dispute with the client. Next slide, please. Legal risk, operational risk, weak capabilities and competence. So legal risk, legal changes, minimum wage, for instance, suddenly changed. So you have like the execution costs are changing. Contractual misinterpretation, loopholes in the contract, poor tender document. It's a typical risk you encounter. Operational difficulties. It's actually you win a project, then you have to ship, you bring your material, bring, your workers, and you face, visa issues, work permit issues, and you end up going into all the bureaucracy of Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Interior. And those are, clearly problems that can kill the execution of your project. Weak capabilities and competencies, it's actually one of the, issue you can face in those markets is you're facing a client which has actually weak experience in contract execution or in tendering process. So next slide, please, Didier. Okay. One of the main risks you will certainly face in these countries is corruption and bribery. Despite all the efforts that we've seen, and we've seen clearly evolution in many of the countries, the prospects are still grim. So you will face corruption or bribery in these countries. So either you will be asked at some point at any stage of the contract, someone will try to ask you something, or you will face the situation where your competitors are actually going in, paying, bribing. Some companies from different countries have different cultures, so these are the issues you will definitely face. But you have to be very cautious. It's a serious risk. It differs from one country to another in the region. Clearly, some countries have made the fantastic work and improved a lot in the last 10 years, like either UAE, Qatar. Those countries have improved. Some countries are clearly a red flag in terms of corruption. So the question now is actually how do you mitigate those risks? We've this, other panelists mentioned that. I think clearly going into foreign markets is very difficult. It's time consuming. You have to, you can't do it, sometimes through Zoom or whatever. You clearly have to be there. So one of the best approach, in my opinion, is actually try to look at local partners. So trying to find local partners, agent, distributor, whatever you want to call it. Selecting the local partner is a very sometimes challenging process. You clearly want to have someone aligned with your interest, that knows has experience in public procurement, local public procurement, in the regulation and the laws, clearly has access to information, clearly also has a network, so can get you the meetings and because in those countries, these are human contacts are still important. But on the other hand, with the local partners can also help you verify also the existence of the budget. Sometimes, countries or public authorities issues a tender, but they don't have the budget yet. So you need someone to tell you whether this budget exists and whether the Ministry of Finance has allocated this money. Same, someone that can help you with the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Interior for visa licenses, because winning a project is not is great, but execution can be sometimes the main issue, and then you need to have sometimes someone that knows and has his way in the country. avoiding clearly some of the mistakes. Typically you will always, I mean, anyone doing business development will know that you always have like the son of someone, the prince of someone, someone, the Mr. I know everyone and so on. These are usually red flags, so you want to try to avoid them or be cautious. Incorporating a local entity is also could be a good idea. Some of the countries still have the 51 local ownership, so you will have to but this can be managed through shareholders agreements in order for you to keep the management. Other approach to mitigating, next slide please, Didier, mitigating your risk. We've discussed that clearly, making alliances, joint venture consortium, either with local entities or international partners, with existing, presence in the country or experience. Subcontracting is a way to enter the market sometimes, either with a Belgian or EU main contractor, which has, a local knowledge, is a way to get used to the country and local regulation about public procurement. Business network, it's important to have, to talk to each other. I mean, we've seen it's great. We've seen great, online portal that was described by Sami before, how to create, a consortium, but also how to check people. You need sometimes to know if someone, your third parties you're talking to are blacklisted or, have their bad reputation on the market. Next slide. Clearly, you need to use the diplomatic network, and commercial attaches are very important, helping you organize meetings, access information, checking individuals, but also helping you, facing some, issues with corruption and anti-bribery. Credendo is clearly also very helpful for, in some of the procurement, you will have to have like a credit buyers in some industries, building them, but also performance bonds and releasing them, and all these financial risks are key in public procurement. But in generally speaking, you have to know that Belgium has a very good reputation. It is considered, politically as neutral, so which is positive. I mean, sometimes it's positive, sometimes not. I mean, clearly France or German companies have, sometimes stronger diplomatic or political backing, but it also have, on the other hand, when, France has a bad relation with, for political reason with the country, the companies will pay the price. Belgium in general is actually pretty neutral, and it's known for having talents and great companies. Next slide. Corruption, I've mentioned that's one of the main risks you will face. I think one of the best approaches from the day one, when you enter a market, any market, make it clear that you don't do bribery. Generally speaking, on the market, you always have you always know who's paying and who's not. I mean, and when you're known as not paying, not going into bribery, it's easier. It's no one will. I mean, you will face less risk of being asked. Actually, clearly having compliance statement signing by local partner, third parties, training your local partner, because your responsibility will be actually whether or not you trained your local partner and you informed him about, because sometimes local partners can act and do things you're not aware of. It's important to train them and be aligned on these issues. Watching red flags, some Some events can be red flagged, due diligence on third parties, everyone. And we've seen some countries have developed, corruption reporting mechanism. You have to be aware of that, and you have to know those mechanisms, but also I think definitely reporting them to your embassy and the commercial attaches is an important issue. So that's it. I think I tried to be short and as concrete as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, George. I think this brings us to the end of all the contributions, and I would like, first of all, I would like to thank everybody. Quite obviously, I think we had some important contributions, some very interesting items that have been developed. And I'm very glad that you mentioned during your last presentation, George, that Belgium is well perceived in the world, and we tend to forget that. We don't take that quite often enough. We don't take that into account. If some public procurement has been launched, and I particularly refer now to purely national public procurements, the region you have described is a very good one, because it goes for countries that are a little bit even worse from time to time, and we can refer to certain markets in Black Africa. It can refer also to markets which are a little bit better, and we are looking then at the region of Southeast Asia. And I think the MENA region is just in between and is a good comparison of all the different, and everywhere I came, every single person you talk to, they emphasize that Belgium has a good reputation. We are known for much more than beer and chocolates. We are innovative from life sciences point of view, which is a particular purchasing public procurement products, for instance. We do have that reputation, and maybe we should put some more eggs into that basket. Once again, thank you for all. Normally, this is now the moment where I would like to give the floor to the attendees, but given the fact that we have overrun the foreseen schedule with already more than half an hour, what we would propose is that anybody remaining with a question that hasn't been answered yet by mail in writing, please do contact us. You have trade@trade4you at abhace.be, which is quite a difficult one if you spell it out. It's something I realized now when doing it. Do not hesitate. You have our contact details. Ask your question. Quite obviously, the contributions of each and every one will be published on our website, on LinkedIn, will also be made available by email to you. For obvious reasons, we will not send in the PowerPoints themselves, but the PDF versions. You might have a blocked email address otherwise. But once again, any question remaining, any help for any question for help, for support, you have the right people now. Do not hesitate to reach out. And I'm quite sure that when we take it all into account, that the Belgian SMEs and other Belgian companies can make their market share on the level of public procurement a little bit bigger. Before I forget, there are two events which I would like to share with you. And I now need to go, quite obviously, to my screen. There are two other events, and I almost forgot. I apologize. But may I make some publicity for two other webinars which are taking place in the near future. The first one is a webinar organized by the 3 regions and which will go on, which will go further on the subject we discussed, which is the access to EU procurement. So specifically the TED possibilities, the publication. This event is taking place on the 10th of December. As the link will be joined, you can register directly through the link. The second one is building partnerships between India and Belgium for a current dissemination of the COVID-19 vaccines, especially important for people within that life sciences marketed. There you can register. It's for the 8th of December, and you can register directly by sending an email to vidyat.cii.in. This partnership seminar is a collaboration between the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Chamber of Indian Industries. So this really brings us to the end. Thank you all and enjoy the day. Thank you.